internet. That's also some kind of change that we have been through in the last 15 years or what? Can you feel the same way?
Yeah, I do. I think that there's something a bit scary about it all, because there are all of these amazing tools that we've created that were invented to be our servants, and they've done so well. They are so entertaining and amusing and effective that they've actually moved from being outside of us and entered into us and come to affect our minds and our behavior in ways that we're not always completely conscious of. And I think that most people, certainly I include myself in this, feel a little bit different than a few years ago. A little more tense, a little more distracted, struggle to concentrate. I can still concentrate, but it requires much more effort than I think it used to before, because there are so many things going on, so many distractions, and it retrains the brain to be constantly looking for these new stimuli all over the place. And some of it allows us to use these technologies, some of which are great. But I also think that there's the risk that it removes from it prevents us from performing some of the most creative things that we did in the past, which did require a different sort of pace. It did require protracted attention, including things like reading books and writing books, and many other forms or elements of our culture that we've always valued greatly. So I think it's a bit worrying. But I think though that what's important is to be conscious of it all. I think that the danger is that one absorbs all these things unaware. So I would think probably that the majority of people now spend most of their waking hours looking at a screen in the West, in the industrialized. I would think most people do, and it's sort of a disturbing thought, but I think it's probably true.
You could probably call your novel a protest novel in this sense. I made a bit of detective work here.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I exposed my revelation to you yesterday. The thing I found was that the first word in this novel is pen.
Right.
And it's a pen that scratches a paper. And I was absolutely certain that this was on purpose.
It wasn't on purpose, but I like the idea that it was, so I should start claiming that.
It is a novel very much about changing technologies.
Yeah, although I would just say that you said it's sort of a protest novel. I don't think of it as a protest novel because I don't like the idea of writing a novel that is trying to preach in any way. I don't like to read those novels, and I don't think that's what a novel really should be about. I think that what I try to do with this book is just to stir up some of the issues that I think are really important and interesting, and tell some stories that will draw people into some of those ideas in order that they think about them themselves. And I have certain opinions on them. In other areas, I'm not sure what I do think. And I imagine that a lot of the readers would respond in the same way. But I would hope that what I wrote would encourage people to consider some of these things. And that's really one of the main reasons why this book is structured as it is, because by placing these different sections right next to each other, sections of time, it has you were talking before about time, and I think that one of the importances of that in this book is to allow the fiction to do something that experience can't, which is to leap from one period to another directly just by turning the page, and thereby to see the contrast and the things that we have gained over this past period and the things that we have lost, brought into sharp relief by seeing them lined up right next to each other like that.
Now you're starting to sound exactly like Don Draper when he sells this carousel to the people at Kodak. You know that? That's exactly what he says, that it allows you to travel in time, like a child, from one place to another instantly, just by clicking this machine or just by turning the paper in your novel.
Yeah, I think that the manipulation of time is one of the, along with, say, the access to the inner world of people, is what are probably two of the great powers of fiction, in my view. That different forms of storytelling have different strengths, and I think that for fiction, among its greatest powers, is the ability to be able to move about in time and to be able to play with that in a way that we just can't in experience, but allows us a perspective that we could never live, but that enriches our life by having been exposed to it.
Just before the Gothenburg Book Fair last year, my newspaper, Dagens Nyheter, published a lengthy article by your colleague, American author Jonathan Franzen. This article was a heavy attack on the modern world in general and on the digital world in particular.
Yeah.
Did you read this article?
I did read it, yeah.
Did you agree on his conclusions?
No, I mean, I suppose I think I'm glad that Jonathan Franzen is out there getting angry. I'm glad that he exists, but I don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily want to share in that same sort of ranting anger, because I think that it's unproductive in the end. I think that there's a line in the book actually where Thule, the main character, is talking about her struggles as a bookseller and wondering whether it's a job that will even exist in the future. But she says that there's no point in shaking your finger at a tidal wave when it's coming at you, and I really believe that's true. I think that if you look at history, anybody who has ever lamented the development of a new technology has ended up seeming increasingly obscure and foolish over time. There were people who, in 200 years ago were saying these damn trains are the most outrageous thing and they're going to ruin the world.
Yeah, Luddites. I don't know.
Luddites, yeah.
Luddites.
Yeah. And it's true of every new technology. And now, if you think,
so you're not a Luddite?
No, I don't think so. I think that my attitude towards technology is that it's if it's effective and if it appeals to human beings, it's inevitable. And so there's all you can do really is pay attention to it and think about it and decide individually how much of it you wish to incorporate into your own life and how much you wish to avoid. So, for example, something like Twitter is something that I have been pressured to join in on, but I won't, because I don't see any place for it in my life, and I don't think that it would improve me in any way. And I don't object to people who use it. I completely understand its value for certain people. But for me, it seems that if I were walking around looking for tweets, it would change the way that I experienced everything. That I would, instead of sitting here having this conversation, I would be thinking in part of me about how as soon as I'm done, I will go and tweet. So it ends up filtering your life through the Twitter feed. And it also prevents you from storing up ideas that you might have and digesting them and chewing them over time, and coming out with something that is maybe that you really feel strongly about, that you feel that you can articulate in a careful way. And that's precisely what I would like to do with fiction, rather than just spewing out a constant stream of whatever pops into my head. It's not for me, but I think that those sorts of decisions are ones that are for everybody to make, and I don't think that it necessarily means that you condemn the world of a new technology if other people are finding some value in it. But I think it does behoove each of us to decide what we want to do with it.
I think this sounds reasonable, but isn't there, an insolvable contradiction between writing such a thick novel and living in the modern times? How do you do when you write? Do you turn off the internet or?
Yeah, I do actually.
You do?
I do. Yeah, there's a software program I use called Freedom, and
symbolical name.
Very, and it's brings up a little box on your screen. You type in the amount of the time that you want freedom, and cuts off the internet completely for that period. And what I find extraordinary about it is not only that it's so useful, that when I put in, say, 2-3 hours of this, then I really am so much more productive. But also, as soon as I hit yes, then I feel a sort of tranquility. I suddenly feel a bit calmer, and it happens almost every time. And it's a strange effect, but definitely a real one. So yeah, I do exactly those sorts of things.
Would you have a cell phone?
Yeah. I mean, there are aspects of technology that I think are wonderfully valuable and useful. Medical technology, and we can now travel all around the world. We can read things from anywhere. But I mean, one of the things you were talking about asking about is whether a book like a novel is somehow antithetical to the time that we're in. I think the answer is yes. I think it definitely is. But I also think that means two things for me. It leads me to two conclusions. One is that that literature is endangered, but the other is that perhaps literature has hope because of the fact that it is very, very that it runs contrary to the times, that it offers something that normal existence really doesn't, that the way that we live now is very, very fractured and with our attention leaping all over the place and rarely focusing in on any one thing. And a novel is a sort of book that requires you to pause all of your own urges and appetites and your own will for the period that you read, focus on all of these other characters' wills for that period, and then and lose yourself completely into that. And that is very, very that is sharply against the nature of how we generally live now. Now that could mean that it's disastrously endangered, but I think that maybe it will offer people something of relief in the same sort of sense of tranquility that I might get from pausing the internet for a while. I think that people will get, if they read a book that they enjoy that suits them, then it's a moment to drift into a different level of thought, one that we rarely access, and that for much of our modern history has been among the most important part of our culture. So I mean, with that, I have a strong preference, obviously.
So you could call it a declaration of love to the book itself.
Yeah,
this novel.
Yeah, I think it definitely is.
I mean, books take a very important part in the novel, not just the fact that it takes place. Some parts of it takes place in a second-hand bookshop.
That's right. Yeah, it is, and as you say, it begins there. But and I think that another element of books that is really important in this one is that the main character is she's really raised by books in a way that she has a strange and rather insufficient childhood in terms of the way that she's raised, the way that she's taught.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, it's complicated, and so she spends she's one of those kids who spends all of her time just reading and experiences the larger world for the first time through literature rather than through experience, and then gradually finds herself discovering that the real world isn't quite what she's found in her books. But books throughout this novel represent for her and for other important characters in it, they represent a sort of companionship and communion. And we were talking before about place and the not really knowing quite where you fit. Well, for some of the outsiders in this book, then where they fit, where they find some sort of a common group is among the writers and characters that they discover in print. And these might be authors whom they'll never meet, authors who lived 300 years before, or who speak a different language, one that they'll never know. But nonetheless, in their literary works, they're able to find friendship and ideas that stimulate and change and determine the course of their existence, and that's I think a wonderful anchor for these people when everything else is swirling around so confusingly, both in terms of the times and in terms of the place.
There's especially one book that gets carried around literally in your novel, a very heavy one as well, Nicholas Nickleby by Dickens.
Yeah, that's important for Thule because she, as I said, she's lost in novels when she's a little girl, and in reading these stories, she, in living this rather unhappy life at a school that she doesn't enjoy and feeling extraordinarily solitary and isolated, then she, in that book, it's about a young man who ends up working at a school for outcast children. And at a certain stage, he finds this poor, destitute boy there and takes him by the hand and leads him away to a better life. And Thule is somebody who's not in that sort of desperate condition, but is nonetheless awfully unhappy. And so she reads that book with a sort of fantasy about somebody taking her by the hand and leading her off to characters who are more exciting, more interesting, and more her sort of people than the ones that she's surrounded by. Bit of a fantasy that a lot of outsiders would have. And she, this makes her then extremely vulnerable to the people who ultimately do enter into her life. And she sees in them characters who are akin to Dickens' characters. And as the book develops, then we come to understand who they are and whether they are or not characters who are evil or good.
There's one of them who has an important part in her life is an old Russian man, or well, let's say he's Russian at least.
Yeah.
He has, for me, he gets some kind of symbolic importance as a symbol for the whole 20th century and the traumatic experience of the Western world during this time.
Yeah. Humphrey is a peculiar and sort of funny curmudgeon of an old man, and he finds himself. He's also lived a rather strange life, and he meets Tully when she's just a little kid, and he recognizes that she's rather lost, and the two of them begin a friendship. So he's in his 60s when they meet, and she's about 10. But nonetheless, they recognize in each other some sort of kindred spirits, and he takes it upon himself to educate her, really, to give her the right books to read. And I mean, she's a tiny girl, and he's giving her these extraordinarily complicated works of philosophy and history and so forth, because he's one who has lived almost entirely in that past. And as you said, he's by the time the 21st century rolls around, he is still completely lodged in the ideas and ideologies of the previous century, and he's still fighting through the battles of communism and fascism, and that's really where he feels his intellectual soul was developed, and that the 21st century is a crazed and confusing place to him. And he says at a certain point that, you can go ahead with your 21st century, I'll stay in mine, the one I know.
I mean, he's an old man, and some of the funniest parts in your novel are also rants by, I mean, not so old men, but men getting a bit older. I get the feeling that you want to portray them as the older you get, the more conservative you get. I mean, some of these rants are hilariously funny when they rage against politics, against the modern world.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly true that people do, of course, get more conservative as they age. There's that great line by Churchill about how a young man who is not a liberal, who is not on the left, has no heart, and an old man who is not on the right has no mind. And I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly the case that people do drift to the right as they get older. But it's not actually to do with right or left in the way I conceive of it so much. It's more to do with power and impotence, and power in the sense of one of the meanings that I'm talking about in the title of this book, The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, that the characters in this book, many of them are at different stages of the human powers that they'll have over the course of their life, the physical and mental strengths that rise and fall over the course of one lifetime. So there's Tully as she's growing up and she's a child, and she's really gaining competency and understanding the world, up to the characters in there who are sort of in adulthood, like the one you're talking about, the ranting man who has reached, let's say, the limits of his powers, and then Humphrey, who is an old man who is losing his powers. But I think that one of the things that I find interesting is how, I think one of the causes for people men ranting, let's say, in their 40s and onwards, is because they recognize with a sense of outrage that they can't really change things, that most people are raised with some degree of egotism, in a sense that they should have the power to run things, and they have hopes and aspirations for what they can do and the success that they'll have. And then at a certain point, you recognize that you won't be able to achieve all of that, and that the world becomes increasingly irritating because it doesn't just do what you would like it to do. And that's what those people, I think that's the impulse of that sort of angry response.
I touched upon the subject of nostalgia today because I found that when I turned 40, this sense grew stronger in me. And as you said yourself here, as you get older, you get more conservative. Perhaps there's something to think about for you today, Tom. Because I happen to know that it's a special day for you.
It's
your 40th birthday.
It is my 40th birthday.
Yeah.
Not a special day, but
So we have a surprise for you here. Here is Maria Kjellson, who's the head CEO of the Gothenburg Book Fair, and we're here to congratulate you.
Thank you very much. I don't feel like I accomplished anything. I just sat around and I became 40. I didn't do anything.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That you
Thank you very much.
spent some of this great day yourself.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
And we'd like to sing for you as well, so please sing.
Okay.
Ska vi börja på svenska eller engelska?
Yeah, only Swedish. That's much better.
Ja. Ja må han leva, ja må han leva, ja må han leva ut i 100 år. Ja visst ska han leva, ja visst ska han leva, ja visst ska han leva ut i 100 år. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tom. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. It's quite embarrassing. Thank you.
Ra, 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 ra.
Thank you very much. What's that? Thank you. Pleasure, man. Really nice to see you.
Tack ska ni ha för